All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm here, and I'm going to do introductions here really quickly. We have Todd Wagstaff, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And John Kirkland and Dane Morris. And so all of them here with the City of Calgary and here to give us some incredible information on the new suite. Policies, the rules, the bylaws, and if you don't mind just really quickly, let's just introduce yourselves and then can I give your title, things like that, how long you guys have been with the city and go from there. So Dane, maybe kick off with you.
Sure, yeah, Dane Morris, land use planner with the City of Calgary. I've been with the city for 8 years now. Spent a lot of time working on suites, so happy to be here and provide you guys with some information.
Awesome, thanks Dane. John.
Hi, I'm John Kirkland, Safety Codes Officer of the City of Calgary. I'm in my 12th year doing building inspections.
Awesome, so that's safety codes and
Yep.
Awesome. So you would visit people's houses to inspect suites
Yes.
or various things?
Yep.
Awesome. And Todd?
Good morning. Thanks for having us on. My name's Todd Wagstaff. I'm a Senior Safety Codes Officer with the City of Calgary. Been with the city for 14 years now and spent a lot of time working on secondary suites with builders, contractors, and our team out in the field as well.
Awesome. Well, pleasure having you guys here. Really thrilled. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to turn this over to them. I'll impart some information as we go along. We're going to do this a little bit differently than we have in the past. This meeting is likely to go over time, just from the standpoint that if you have questions, post them up in the chat, and then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be reviewing the questions afterwards and try to get them answered. So we will be online live, answering your questions at the end, scrolling through them, and going from there. So we're going to make sure that we get all the questions answered that we can. It'll take a second to kind of get through the chat there. But other than that, we should be good to go. So Dane, you're kicking it off?
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you. And we have a
Sure.
presentation for you guys, so follow along.
Absolutely. So let's get into this. So we're going to be talking about a lot of different stuff, kind of the way things were, the way things are now, what your process will look like to bring your suite into compliance if it's existing, or how to go about building a new suite. So just a really quick note, just because we're not sure really what everyone's level of understanding is. What exactly is a suite? So I use the term suite to refer to both secondary suites and backyard suites collectively, but they are different. So a secondary suite is a self-contained unit within the main residential building, and it's got really three things. There's living quarters, there's a kitchen, and then there are bathroom facilities. A secondary suite can be located in the basement, which they most commonly are, or they can be on the main floor or actually above an attached garage. A backyard suite is a self-contained dwelling unit with those three criteria, but they're in a separate building in the rear of the parcel. So that can be above a garage, that can be at grade attached to a detached garage, or they can actually be their own building themselves. And again, I do use the term suites to refer to both types collectively.
Perfect.
So prior to March 12th, so March 12th is kind of when things changed, so to speak, with suites in the city. And really, what happened in March was a shifting of the decision-making process for suites. Now before that, suites were allowed in most residential districts in the city of Calgary. So RC2, R1N. I'm going to be talking about districts quite a bit, and I can't really impress upon everyone watching enough that you got to know what your land use district is, and we'll talk about how you find that out here shortly. So prior to March, most districts allowed suites, but the R1, RC1, and RC1L districts did not. So those account for about half of the residential parcels in Calgary. If you want to develop a suite, you had to apply for a land use redesignation, so you had to go to council and get rezoned essentially to RC1S. You want to hop in there with a question?
Yeah.
I heard you pause there.
You see me
yeah.
twitching?
Yeah.
So appreciate that.
Yeah,
Good
absolutely.
use. So give us an example of a land use that is not designated, not even discretionary use, that what suite would not be allowed in.
Currently?
Yeah.
Well, right now, so post March 12th,
Yeah.
suites are allowed in every residential district.
Every residential district.
Every-
But if it's not zoned, so it's a commercial zoning.
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
there'd be
So if
no-
you look up your land use district and you see an R, you can develop a suite.
Okay.
Your pathway to approval will vary depending on your district, but in principle, they're allowed in residential areas.
Fantastic. Thank
Sure. At the time, so prior to March 12th, we had a voluntary registry. So if you had a suite that had gone through the permitting and inspection process, you could put it up on this registry. It was an interactive map and database maintained by the city where prospective tenant could look up an address and say, hey, there's a suite here. It's gone through the approval process with the city. I'm on board with that. I want to pursue renting it. So that was voluntary at the time. And again, at the time, there was no fee for a land use redesignation or development permit where required. So in December 2017, council asked administration, so us, to do a whole bunch of work around suites. Really, it was a shifting of the decision-making process. And what they asked us to do was to look at the 3 remaining districts where suites were not allowed and to make them a discretionary use in those districts. And I'll talk about what that means here shortly. So there were some bylaw amendments to do that. They asked us to develop a policy for city staff to use when reviewing those development permits, reinstate application fees, and to develop a mandatory registry. So at the time it was voluntary. Present state, it is required. We'll get into that here momentarily as well. So we took a large report to council in March that really was intended to implement all this direction from council. And by and large, council did adopt all the items in that report. So that work was approved. Here we are now. What rules are in effect? So like we discussed, so suites are allowed in every residential district citywide. But you have to look at your land use district because depending on your district, a suite may be permitted or it may be discretionary. And that really determines your application pathway. So what you can do is you can go to this website, calgary.ca/suitereform. We've got a pretty handy tool here. You can just punch in your address and it's going to tell you, is a suite, so secondary or backyard, is it permitted or discretionary? And there's a whole bunch of information in terms of what your application pathway looks like. In a nutshell, if a secondary suite is a permitted use, if you meet the rules of the land use bylaw, so you have your parking stall, you have your amenity space, you don't need a development permit. You can move right to building permit and start construction right away.
Does that mean that process you'd be able to bypass the neighbor approval? And
Yeah.
things like that?
So essentially, you meet those rules. Planning isn't involved in the decision-making process.
Great. Okay.
Now, if you're discretionary, that's a whole other process here, and I believe that's actually on my next slide. Oh, one more slide after.
Perfect.
This. So the actual approved land use bylaw changes themselves. So secondary suite and backyard suite were added as discretionary uses to those 3 districts. In terms of backyard suites, I know you touched on it here a few minutes ago. In principle, council adopted backyard suites in those 3 districts, but they told us to go away and do a bit more work, and I'll delve into that here in a second. So about half those parcels in the city, 170,000, are zoned R1, RC1, RC1L, and now they can develop a suite, but they're discretionary. So what does that mean? It means you will always require a development permit. A notice posting is required, so a sandwich board goes up in front of your property, and there is opportunity for appeal by affected landowners. Now, the rules themselves for suites have not changed. So for a secondary suite, you have to provide your parking stall. You have to provide your amenity space.
What do you mean by amenity space?
Amenity space it's a space for the tenant to call their own.
Okay.
So it's an area you set aside for the tenant if they want to set up maybe some patio furniture and a barbecue. Right?
So outdoor space.
Outdoor space. Yeah.
Oh,
it's their
interesting.
private
Okay.
space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And it's there. So
Yes.
it shouldn't be shared. It should be accessible. They should be able to physically get to it.
Yes.
But it's theirs.
Okay.
Right. For backyard suites, only a couple more rules. So your parking stall, your amenity space. Now, depending on how you build your backyard suite, that amenity space can take a couple different forms. It might be a balcony if you're building a suite above a garage. And then there's rules around the height, parcel coverage and siting. So where on your parcel is that backyard suite located? And I added this last bullet because we do get asked this a lot. There are no rules in the bylaw about requiring space or even providing an extra set of waste and recycling carts. If you have a suite and you have a tenant who wants their own set of carts, you can just put in that request through waste and recycling, and you can get an extra set of carts on site. But there's no formal requirement to provide that for your suite or for your
But you can
tenant.
request it.
You can, yeah.
Is there a charge for that, do you know?
There is a charge,
Yeah,
and it'll
sure.
go onto the utility bill, and on however the utility bill is divvied up between the owner, the landlord, and the tenant is kind
Got
of
it.
a private thing, but yeah, there is a charge.
Okay, makes sense.
A bit more on backyard suites. So council did approve them in principle in those 3 districts. Backyard suites are a discretionary use in the other residential districts in the city. They said, go away and do some work around them. So we're looking right now at changing some of the existing rules, whether it's looking at height, the relationship of the backyard suite to the main residential building. Can we manage privacy concerns a bit better with suites or with backyard suites, and then come back to council before the end of the year. So now those rules will apply to backyard suites in every residential district. When we go back to council in Q4 2018, if council likes the rules that we've come back with and the design guidelines, they would approve those rules, and then immediately backyard suites would then be allowed in those 3 districts.
So right now, backyard suites would still sit in front of council?
It all depends on your district. So if we're
Okay.
talking about R1, RC1, RC1L, you can't do a backyard suite right now.
Oh, you cannot?
No, you
Okay.
could do a land use if you want. I would maybe just wait.
Yeah, fair enough.
But if you have like an RC2 parcel, for example, yeah, you can do a backyard suite right now.
Okay,
And the
perfect.
existing rules that we have, you would be subject to.
Fantastic.
So a bit more information on the development permit process. So again, I've said it a few times, you gotta know your land use district. So if a suite is a discretionary use in your district, you will need a development permit. Permitted uses go right to building permit if you meet the rules of the bylaw. And this on the left-hand side is what the notice posting sign looks like. So you'll submit your application to the planning department. So typically that involves a site plan and a floor plan showing your parcel, where your suite is, how big it is, where your amenity space is. And then city staff is going to come out and we're going to put one of these signs in front of your property. Now this is actually a sign for a redesignation, so we'll swap out the word redesignation for development permit and it'll look exactly the same. So this will sit in front of your property to gather feedback from those who want to comment on the application. The file as well will be circulated to the community association and your ward councillor for comment. And then staff are going to be looking at the land use bylaw rules and the policy that we developed and council adopted in March. And I'll talk about that on the next slide. So looking at rules, looking at policy, and then considering feedback through the notice posting and circulation process. That is planning related. So if there's concerns about the ability for this parcel to provide the required parking, that's something we would look at. So through that process, we'll reach a decision on your file, so approval or possibly refusal. And then there is an opportunity for appeal once decision is made on that development permit. Do you want to jump in again?
Just give us a quick Reader's Digest version on the difference, just for the viewership out there, the difference between the development permit and the building permit.
Sure. I think the easiest way to look at it is development permits. We're focused on the where and the what. So where is it allowed in the city? Where is it allowed on your parcel? And what does it look like? Building code is really focused on, well, how is it constructed? Right? So for development permit, we're not really concerned with what type of drywall you have or smoke seals or any of that stuff. That's really critical stuff that we address at building permits.
Todd, that'd be your guys' wheelhouse.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Awesome, got it. Okay.
And currently, there is no fee for that development permit, but building and trade permits do have their fees. So this policy document. So council asked us to write a policy for staff to consider when they're looking at development permits for suites. It's available on our website. It's a relatively short policy document, and it has a few items that come out of the very public conversations we've had about suites, whether it's at council or through previous public hearings. So really, it has language that clarifies the emphasis on providing required parking. In terms of amenity space, it has to be functional and accessible. It can't be tucked away in a far corner of your parcel that the tenant can't actually get to.
Got it.
And there are some policy statements regarding privacy in terms of backyard suites. So, where should you position your balcony if you're doing that? So it's not, completely encroaching upon to the neighbor's property, staring into their backyard. So, if you require a development permit for a suite, secondary or backyard, staff will be referring to this policy document, and you can get it on our main suite website. So definitely look at that in addition to the bylaw rules when you're doing a development permit. So fees. So council did ask us to reinstate fees for a land use and development permit. So before March, there was no fees. You could go to council for free. Development permits, if you required one, did not have a fee. Council asked us to bring those back. So the fee for a land use is reinstated. So if you choose to do a land use, so to go from RC1 to RC1S, there's a fee for that. And there is a very nuanced difference between RC1S and the new rules for RC1. And I'm not sure that's, we need to get into that today,
fair enough,
but if there are questions, we can certainly talk about that. And we did reinstate the fee for development permit, but in the same breath, we waived it. So we brought it back, and then in the same council meeting, we took it away. Because what we're calling, I guess, the next 2 years is an amnesty period. So really, it officially kicks off June of 2018 and goes to June 2020. And it's a 2-year period where your development permit fee is waived, and as well, your registry fee is waived. And the registry fee we're talking about here in a few seconds. Why we're calling it an amnesty period is that really for the next 2 years, city staff, whether it's our development inspectors or our building inspectors, they're going to be out in the field working with people who own existing suites, working with them to bring them into compliance. So during that period, we're not, how do I put this correctly? We're not as interested in moving quickly to fines and charges, right? We want to work with folks.
Like educational
Yeah.
period versus
Yeah.
like police.
The whole
Yeah.
idea is to help the public make their suites safe.
Yeah,
That's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Get them in the door at City Hall to go through the development permit and building permit process. So,
Perfect.
So the development permit fee is waived, and there will be no fee for the registry.
I just want to make a sub-statement to that. The realtors, you guys are largely one of the first line of defense on this in terms of making your clients aware of this, that this is less about policing right now and more about let's just get things up to code and, and like you said, safety of the tenants, which I know we're going to talk about here in a moment, but and also for the value of their property. If you can actually market it as a legal suite versus illegal, that has value from income potential and revenue potential. So
Yeah, and we're firming up what those processes look like. But like right now, if you have a property that has a suite and you don't know if it's legal or not or what approvals you need, you can call into our call center 268-5311 and say, I have this property, I want to make it compliant, and we'll get people out there in a handful of business days, right, to go through what you require, whether it's planning and or building permits. So
Got it.
yeah. And then after those 2 years, June 2020, I would say that our approach will be a bit more firmer with folks in terms of bringing your suite into compliance, and then fees will be reinstated, or your development permit fee will be reinstated in June 2020.
Perfect.
Now the registry. So it's not a license. We're calling it a registry, and there's a bit of a difference there. The focus is on safe, compliant suites. So when you go through the permitting and inspection process, so planning and building, once you complete that process, your suite must be placed on the registry, so we will be doing it for you automatically. It'll go on this registry if you intend to rent that suite to the public and advertise it for rent to the public. There's a one-time fee to go on the registry. Now, if you're currently on it, you won't be charged for it. And the fee itself for the registry is waived along with development permit fees until June 2020. So again, if you have a suite and you intend to advertise it for rent to the public, you will go on this registry, but there's no fee for that until June 2020. And again, to go on it, you have to go through the permitting and inspection process. So planning permits if required, and then your building and trade permits. You go on the registry. It's a really, really well done interactive map and database where people can confirm that it's gone through those processes.
Perfect.
So I think that's where I step aside, and I'll hand it over
Yeah.
to Todd and
You can
John.
hang out right there,
Okay.
and I'll just slide the computer over there. All right, gentlemen,
Okay.
kick it off.
Okay, good morning. I'm here to talk about the website that is set up with calgary.ca. It's very informative. What I can suggest is that you have a chance to go look at it. It will answer a lot of questions you might have. If you go to the calgary.ca/suites, this is where it will come up. And there's 3 sections to help you through applying for a secondary suite, benefits, and the secondary suite registry, which you can find out if you're looking to rent or a safe secondary suite that you're looking at. So that is just a matter of putting in your address. Next slide. This is more, the secondary suites and backyard suites. It's what you need to do to build. It helps determine if a suite is allowed, and that is, as Dane had mentioned earlier, you can put in your address into the property information, and it'll pop up what your land use is.
That's great.
Then further, if you're going to be making an application, there's online submissions are coming soon. We're looking, I believe, summer of 2018. Right now you can book an appointment, and we'll save you time. I believe it's the 5311 number.
Through 5311, yeah, or we have a live chat you can speak to the folks downtown
Okay.
on as well.
That's great.
Yeah, and so this page will help you, what you need to do to make an application. Helps you prepare drawings that are what would be required. There's a building code and bylaws. The bylaw information covers secondary suites and the timelines anticipated for a redesignation, development permit, and or for building permits. It also will help you with your inspection process for the building and trade permits, what would be required for that inspection.
Great.
It's this more here talk about the building code and bylaw. There's a lot of code information on this page, and a lot of illustrations, videos, talks about window sizes and what would be required for existing suites prior to 2007 and suites in
Are we there?
1970. Yeah, and I believe that's where I will step aside, and Todd will cover
Yeah,
that a
let's
bit more.
go on a little bit further here. So as John said, our website really is done very, very well. There's tabs on there you can go through. There's videos on there. When I meet with a contractor or a homeowner, I typically take out my iPad and go through the website with them because there is a lot of really good information on there. There's sample drawings, just about everything you need to know as far as code requirements you'll see on there. If you do have some questions as you go through the website, there is an online chat. If you look down on the bottom right-hand corner there, you can click on there, and there is actually a person on the other end of the screen, so they'll go back and forth with you if you have specific questions as far as code items and that kind of stuff. This one here, so there is a difference between an existing suite that was constructed prior to, prior to December 31st, 2006, and a brand new suite that would be constructed today. So there are a couple sets of rules. One would be for upgrading an existing suite, and the other set of rules is for building a brand new suite. So I'm going to get into some of the most important safety aspects of the projects. I'm certainly it's not my intent to pull out the 2014 building code and go through all the code articles related to building a secondary suite, but what I would like to touch on are the three most important factors when either upgrading or constructing a brand new suite. So as the slide shows here, it's not that bad. It isn't that bad as long as you have the correct information up front and you know where to find the correct information. And that's why we're out doing these presentations, kind of showing our website where to find the information. But we don't want anybody to be like this poor guy here where he's having a hard time either before he gets his permits or as he's going through the course of construction. We've all been there, so that's the intent here, is to point you in the right direction, get you the correct information right out of the gates.
I feel like there's tons of, in terms of what is required, watching the questions that our agents have on our Facebook feed and the questions we get from our managers we have a process called Quick Connect where agents can answer questions. There's so much misinformation about this.
Absolutely.
So I am
yeah.
looking forward to this in terms of finding out
Yeah,
what's true
absolutely.
or not.
And unfortunately, there seems to be more misinformation than proper information. So
Right.
that's why we're here to kind of share where to get the correct information
Awesome.
quickly and easily. So I'm going to just touch on the three most important things here as far as safety aspects go. So the number one thing, the very most important item is early detection. So if we've got a basement suite, the most important thing is early detection. If there's a fire either downstairs or upstairs, we need all the occupants of the building to be alerted so that they can safely exit the building. So number one thing is smoke alarms. They do need to be hardwired, so they can't be battery operated, because we know what happens with those ones. They start to chirp once in a while, gets annoying, you take the battery out, think you're going to get a battery on the weekend. Well, 3 months later, you're without an operable smoke alarm. So they have to be
Good
hardwired.
reminder, there might be one of my basements.
Yeah,
like that
exactly.
Right now, actually.
So they need to be hardwired. They also need to be interconnected, so that if one, say, downstairs goes off, it has to alarm the upstairs tenant as well. So everybody knows that something's happening in that dwelling unit. They can be interconnected wirelessly, so it saves a little bit of work where you don't have to physically run a wire from the basement to the main floor detector. They can talk to each other wirelessly, but they do need to be hardwired, connected to the units directly.
Fantastic.
The next slide here shows some of the locations where the smoke alarms should be. So basically, on a pre-2007 secondary suite, you need to have a smoke alarm in common areas, one in each area, and interconnected together. The brand new suites, there was a code change in the 2014 code that now requires them to be in every bedroom.
Wow.
So certainly that's the best case scenario. Even
Yeah.
if you have an existing one, it's not a bad idea to put them in every bedroom and every hallway leading to the bedrooms. But for the pre-existing ones, just one per level. But if you want to put one in every bedroom, absolutely, we would be more than happy to see that out there. The next second important factor is exiting. We need to get out of the building. So if we hear that smoke alarm go off, we got to get out of the building. So every bedroom has to have a proper egress window. So it has to be a correct size and style of window. So I've got a few slides here on different styles of windows. So this one here is a casement window. It just swings open on a hinge. And the biggest thing is they need to be of a certain size. So whether it's a sliding window, a casement window, an awning window, they all need to have, so if you measure when the window's open from edge to edge, left to right, and from top to bottom, that whole area has to equate to at least 0.35 meters square. And that's just so that somebody can actually exit the window. Also, both dimensions have to be at least 380 millimeters in diameter, in measurement. And the reason for that is we don't want to have like an 8-inch wide window that's 6 feet long. Obviously,
Right. Yeah.
it's going to meet the 0.35 meters square, but you're still not going to be able to fit out of there. So there's two dimensions that we look at that have to be in place for it to be a proper egress window.
Perfect.
And this one here is an interesting one. So these ones we do allow. They meet the correct size dimensions. The only have to be careful with the awning style windows is they have to open and stay open at 90 degrees on their own. So when you lift that open, it's got to stay open at 90 degrees. So where we've seen issues with these ones is at rough stage before drywall and maybe before somebody builds their bulkheads or puts their blinds in, it may stay open on its own nicely, but just even that extra half inch of drywall, it won't hinge and stay open at the top.
Yep.
So that's a real bummer. When you get done your project, you go to open the window, now you've got big issues trying to refit that window so that it'll stay open at 90 degrees. A couple other things about windows. You've got to be careful. You don't want to have bars or locks on the windows. And they have to be easily openable without special tools or knowledge. So if you're retrofitting an existing window, talk to your window contractors, and they can make any size window, essentially, for you. So you might have an existing opening that has a non-compliant window that you can actually fit a new window that will meet the size requirements. So you might not have to cut out concrete or framing in order to fit a new window in. You might be able to just get a new one custom made from one of the window manufacturers. Lastly, this is probably the most difficult code article to follow. So the third thing is we need to have a smoke separation. And when I say smoke separation, we need to have half-inch drywall that's mud and taped on all the joints that separates common areas from the suites and suites to suites. So the most typical application I can think of is we go to a 1950s bungalow. Maybe they had an old suite in there and they've got the old 1 foot by 1 foot ceiling tiles.
Yep.
Those aren't drywall. They're highly combustible. So in that scenario, you'd have to drywall the ceiling.
Got it.
So the entire suite has to have half-inch drywall, mud and taped. The mechanical rooms, and that's why I've got this picture up here. This is a relatively good job that somebody's done here, but you basically need to make a smoke seal in there. So it has to be tightly fitted around all the duct penetrations, electrical penetrations, plumbing. So this is where it does get quite difficult in an existing suite, and this is why I've got this next picture here. So this is what you're up against. And you know, I don't know how many times I've heard it's impossible to do. It is, and I agree, it's very, very difficult sometimes to get that drywall, but there are ways to do it, and that's why it's important to know up front what the requirements are.
Got it.
If you have a look at your mechanical room, you might have to take some ductwork down or some plumbing down in order to get that smoke seal in the mechanical room. So just something to keep in mind. I don't know how many jobs we've gone to, John, where we go to do a final inspection and the mechanical room still looks like this.
Exactly.
And it's horrible when we walk in and go, well, we've got to have you drywall the mechanical room. So just this is the biggest item or troublesome item when we're looking at the existing homes especially.
So you don't need insulation in there, just
No.
the drywall.
Just the drywall. And the whole idea is if there is a fire in either the suite or the mechanical room or the exiting area, that smoke propagation stays in that area. It doesn't go to the rest of the suite. Also, it prevents the spread of fire and explosion. That's the whole idea, is to stop that from the point of origin.
So there was a, and it might be a myth now, you needed special fire retardant barriers in between the levels of the suite, like in the roof and stuff. That's not the case?
So yeah, in 2006 building code, that's where the section for secondary suites started, and that's where there was a change to have a smoke separation. It's not a fire separation anymore. So
Fantastic.
It's just a smoke separation, which makes it a little bit easier, but it's still a fair amount of work, especially if you don't plan properly to get that smoke separation in
Got
place.
it.
And that's my last slide.
I got a few questions for you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so I'll just go through some takeaways here, and then I think we're going to open to some questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And please, today the intent isn't for specific questions if you have a
Yeah, we're not
permit
gonna
that's in the
specific-
process.
yeah,
But if you have general
scenario
questions,
go-
please feel free to send them in, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. So hopefully, with Dean's information, you've got the bylaw stuff down, the zoning. Again, our whole intent is to help owners, contractors, and the public to get through this as easily as possible. So please, if you have questions, give us a phone call in, check out the website, and there's a ton of information there. So thanks for having us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you everyone for that. Okay, so because I'm selfish, I'm going to start with my questions really quick here. And a couple things. Number one, just since we're on the topic of the safety side, I guess this isn't safety related, but separate metering. Do you need separate metering of the upper suite and the basement suite for electricity or 2 hot water tanks or anything else like that?
No, that's a great question, and you don't need separate metering. Or one of the other questions along the same line is, do both tenants have to have access to the mechanical room and the electrical panel?
Yes.
And they do not. So that's
Okay.
a big saver, because we used to have a bylaw in place that said both upper and lower tenants had to have access to the overcurrent device. So we'd have people, they'd put in a separate panel upstairs, which is a extremely, in some cases, costly endeavor. So
Perfect. Okay. And then now on access again, having the it used to be that you, or maybe not used to be, but it was just a myth, is that you couldn't have like something like shared laundry because the upstairs could not have access to get to the downstairs door. Have you heard anything about that? Or is that true?
So each tenant needs a laundry facility. So
Each tenant needs a laundry
they can share one in a common area, which
Okay.
is quite often what we'll see, especially on an existing basement suite. They'll share the mechanical and laundry area.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. And then Dane, one of the things that we had talked about is because when you do the development permit, you need to put that notice out to the neighbors.
Yeah,
And we had talked about having this disgruntled neighbor who
Yeah.
wants it not in my backyard. So what can the community association and the neighbors stop?
Well, I guess a couple things there. So one, to be clear, city staff put that notice out in front of your property, so it's
Right.
not on the applicant to do that work. And I think before you even put in your application or before that circulation process begins, it's worthwhile to speak to your neighbors, right? Or maybe even shoot an email to the community association to say, this is what I'm looking at doing. You're going to be seeing a notice posting, an application coming forward. I have my parking stalled. That's a big thing people care about. And maybe kind of start to build those relationships
Perfect.
early. Now that being said, I've seen the comments that folks send in. I did the public hearing in March. I know what's out there in terms of suites. So, people will send in comments that are not germane to the application, that aren't planning related, and we're not going to consider those. So, it's not good enough to write a letter to say, you know what, city, don't approve this development permit because my neighbor plays loud music or doesn't cut
Right.
his grass or whatnot. That's not related to planning stuff. So, a valid comment may be, the way this parcel is shaped, they physically can't provide the required parking stall.
Got it.
Right? So that's something that we would look at.
And is there a rule about the number of people you're allowed to have living in a residence?
From the planning side, no. I'm not sure on the building code.
Safety side?
Occupancy or...
Yeah, no, there's nothing on the building code end of things. Yeah, bylaw might have something, but yeah, it's
Okay.
as long as
Nothing that's in your wheelhouse.
as long as
in your-
there's not beds in the kitchen and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
You have to have that proper egress window. So.
Fair enough. Okay, so first question here. Could a detached garage be converted to a suite? Obviously, given, let's say, proper designation, everything else, it's there. That could be considered a backyard suite.
Yeah, you'd require a development permit, and you'd be putting an application in for a backyard suite. So in terms of a detached garage, it can be at grade, attached to the garage, or it could be above the garage itself. So yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
Perfect.
Can I just add one thing
no,
about this?
If someone's twitching, you're like, oh
Well, it's
no.
an existing garage. If it's just a slab on grade and you're going to build on top, there would have to probably be some changes made to the structure.
Say that again. So let's say it's an existing garage.
That's just a
and you're
slab
doing-
on grade,
Okay.
which is a lot of detached garages are.
Right. Okay.
And if you were planning on doing a suite on top, you would have to be probably doing some structural.
Oh, I
Changes
see. I
to
see.
the
If you're going to
foundation.
do a suite over top of the garage, so you
Yeah.
maintain the garage. If you're just converting the garage and you do insulation, all the other stuff, you could, as in you're not adding anything above, it's just the,
Exactly.
yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah, we have to
You're
look
gonna
at, look at the structure and the frost
Yeah.
protection, for footings and that kind of thing. So
Okay.
it's not a definite no, but certainly you'd have to
It'd be a bit more
be
work.
some
In
engineering
general,
involved.
backyard suites are a fairly expensive endeavor in terms of building code and servicing and whatnot. So, but in principle, yeah, they could definitely pursue that.
Here's one from Bruce Miller. What about the land title situation where there's a caveat that rules with the title, running with the title, that says only one dwelling on the property?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and that was definitely discussed, at length at council. Those instruments on title are not reviewed by planning staff, so we don't look at those when we look at development permits. And those things are on titles across the city, and there's lots of different ones, and they're on every development permit. But we don't look at those. That being said, they are valid title instruments.
So someone that actually has that caveat on title
Yes.
could call in and say, hey, now you're in trouble.
Well, it's a civil matter.
Civil matter,
right?
okay.
So
okay.
there are communities where these exist, and really they were planning tools before we had formal planning tools with the City of Calgary. So there are some communities where it says you can only have one dwelling unit per parcel, and then really, if a neighbor wanted to pursue some type of legal action enforcing that caveat, they can. But it's a civil matter. It's between neighbors.
Perfect. Okay. You want to talk about the nuanced difference between RC1S and RC1?
Sure. And I'll try and explain this as simply as possible, so it might result in more questions. So in the RC1S district, so that's a district that we created a number of years ago, where if you had an RC1 parcel and you wanted to develop a suite, you had to redesignate to this district because it wasn't allowed. So in the S districts, secondary suite is a permitted use. Like we mentioned, if you have a permitted use and you meet the rules of the bylaw, you don't require a development permit. So RC1S still exists as a district,
Right.
so you can pursue that if you want. That being said, in the RC1 districts, so you can only go to RC1S from RC1.
Okay.
Right? So if you have an RC1 parcel, right now you can apply for your development permit for a suite. You don't have to go to council. If you want a permitted use, so if you want to skip the development permit process, you can redesignate to RC1S. So at first blush, it may seem advantageous. You can skip the development permit so you don't have to run the risk of possible appeal. That being said, you do have to pay for it, so it's around $5,000. It's a longer process than the development permit. You have to go to council.
Yeah.
And council may or may not approve your land use, right? They may
Just
say
take your chances. with
they may
RC1.
say, you know what, we just changed the rules. Just go do your development permit. So I think whoever this owner is, they'd have to kind of just look at the pros and cons and make a decision.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that question, Yvette. Jason Schmierko, so you have a property that's been subdivided. Now you have two 25-foot lots with an attached infill. Could you have a suite on each of the 25-foot lots?
This is the question
Yeah.
right here. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Look at this RCD property subdivided with infills. It depends what's been constructed. So really, if you have a lot now that has just a single detached on each, then yeah, you can do a suite.
What about those
subject to the
modern
rules.
attached infills?
So if you have a semi-detached, so a side-by-side, in RC2, no, you cannot do a suite. The RCG district is a district where you can do suites within semis. Now, it's only a matter of time until this question comes up.
Yes.
What about all those existing older side-by-sides and duplexes that have suites? So, I mean, we'll call it an illegal fourplex for
Yeah.
today's conversation.
Yep,
So,
that's perfect.
and
We
it's
see that all the time.
we knew this was going to come up. So if you have one of those buildings, so if you have a side-by-side with suites in it, and we're assuming it's an older building, right? So
Yep.
probably built before 1970. You can do something right now. So you could put in a land use to go to the RCG district, or you could wait. So a couple weeks ago, council asked us to deal with those buildings. So we'll be back before council before the end of the year with a way forward. Now, what that looks like, we have a few different options. So it's undecided yet, but we're actively looking at it. And unfortunately, I'm not quite sure how we're going to handle it, so I don't have an answer at this moment. But you could right now do a land use to RCG district, or maybe just wait and see how things play out. So if this person does have an interest in going to RCG, I would suggest contacting city staff for a meeting, because there's a lot to that in terms of if it's subdivided or not, future plans for the parcel itself, and there's a whole bunch of building code implications.
What does the
as well.
G stand for in RCG?
It's for a contextual ground-oriented development.
Okay.
So it's interesting, the RCG district, I mean, it allows for a greater amount of development potential. So
Okay.
you can do, row houses, you can do townhouses with
Got it.
suites. So
Got it.
there's more to it than just kind of bringing your existing building into compliance.
So we may have touched on this. Thank you, Jason, for that. Al Weeb, can a realtor call in on an address to find out the status of compatibility, like where it's along in the process? Like, let's say it's not even my property. Can I call in and find out about a neighbor's?
No.
Yeah.
You can, I mean, like development permits are notice posted to the
So they're
public,
public.
right? So you can call in and say, I have a question about this development permit number or this address. I mean, the amount of information we can divulge is, there's a limit to it.
Yeah.
But we can do that to a point. In terms of the possibility of compatibility, I mean, there
I
is,
think we touched on that one.
Yeah, and-
Suites, Calgary.ca/suites.
Yeah.
They can call in and get some give
Yeah.
some information on the phone.
Yeah.
Or just enter your address in there. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think we answered this one, Gord Piper, but June 2018 to June 2020, is that 2-year amnesty period?
yeah, and that's what we're calling it. It's a 2-year period where essentially registry and development permit fees are waived, and we're actively out there in the community working with folks, bringing their suites into compliance.
Perfect.
Post June 2020, I mean, we're still out there doing the same thing. Fees are back, and maybe our strategy is slightly different with folks.
Awesome. Christine Versnick, if you've gone through the process of permits, et cetera, when building the suite, but did not register on this registry, will it be considered a secondary suite by the city? Will it still be considered a secondary suite by the city?
It is,
Yeah, so-
and we want to get you on the registry.
Yeah, so if you've got, right now, what happens is once you have a building permit in place, we do the inspections, everything's good. It's an automated process. So once the building permit's closed, it automatically goes on the registry unless the owner decides they don't want to be. But now it's going to be automated regardless. So which is going to work out good for everybody involved, because you can just go City of Calgary legal registered secondary suite. There's no question on whether it's had inspections, permits, and that kind of
So
thing.
you guys will actually register on behalf of the homeowner once it's all done?
Through the building permit process. Yeah, once
Okay.
the building permit's obtained, the inspections are done, it's deemed safe, meets all the minimum code requirements, it automatically will go on the registry.
Great.
And you know what? There's no fee right now for it, so this person can be placed on it right now, right? If they've gone through that permit or gone through that process, there's no fee, so they can go onto it right now at no charge.
Yeah, we would just look up the permit history. If it's there, the inspections have been completed, then absolutely. it'd be-
So Brad Wenenstrom, we're going to have that video posted up in the next 48 hours online. You guys don't want to share this presentation right now, is that correct?
No, typically we don't
Okay.
handle presentations.
Yeah, and that's
Right.
totally fine. And we're going to honor that. So the video will be posted, Brad, and you guys can grab the information. Plus, citycalgary.ca/reform suites.
Suite reform.
Oh, suite
Or you know
reform.
what? There's quite a few websites. The best one's
Calgary.ca/suites.
Suites.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's use
Calgary.ca/suites.
that.
Got it,
Yeah,
got
we'll
it.
use that.
Awesome. So Jason, obviously this is for John here or Todd. Can you put a sprinkler in the mechanical room instead of drywalling? And I imagine that doesn't stop the smoke. Or
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So with an existing suite under the fire code, it is allowed. So as long as it's a licensed sprinkler installer or journeyman plumber, they can do that, and we've
Okay.
asked for verification on that. The 2014 building code on a brand new build, it's not recognized in the code. So it's kind of an odd one, but
so there's a
in
bit of
an
a
existing-
grandfathered if it's
Yeah,
already been
it's just
existing.
because it's
but-
existing, it gives the owner an opportunity to do it with a sprinkler in there.
Okay.
With the new one, there is a process where they can go for a variance or alternative solution on it and propose, and you just have to put a case together why you think it would perform as good or better than drywall throughout.
Fantastic. And Arthur, obviously, regarding the presentation there, giving access to the website, these materials and stuff are available on
Verbatim,
citycalgary.ca,
it's- yeah,
on the
it's all-
suite
it's
side.
all out
So
there on the website,
taking people
yeah.
through that will be important. The window size has to be in every bedroom for the egress windows.
That's correct, yeah. Every bedroom has to have a proper egress window, yeah.
Has anyone ever? You guys ever try to get out of one of those? Like, I mean, so talk to me about window wells for a second here. So,
There is code requirements for that.
there's code requirements for that. Okay.
Like the 2006 code, they were 550.
Yeah,
I believe,
550
and-
millimeters from.
And with the 2014, they're 750. That's the depth from the window
Okay.
out.
So 0.75 meter.
Yeah, it's like 30 inches.
And then if you guys, does anyone ever say, okay, you also need to provide a step stool?
Well, that's,
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of a strange thing, because you have to have the proper type of window, the proper size of window, but it could be 8 feet up in the air. So if you look at the illustrated guide of the building code, it shows recommended putting a dresser or something to get up to the window.
So
that's
be a
kind of one of
responsible
the-
landlord, make
Yeah,
sure that
it's
people have
kinda-
access.
You have to have the proper size and style. If
yeah.
it's up high, it's difficult, but
Tenants dying are bad for business.
Well, and there's even window wells that are pretty deep sometimes too, so
Oh, I've
You
seen.
can get out into the window well, and it's above your head, so
you might need a ladder in there.
Yeah, we scratch our heads sometimes. You look at properties and you're just like, I don't know. Like I'm looking at myself and I consider myself pretty fit. I mean, this is like a Spartan race, ex-warrior obstacle to try to escape from the.
Just to point out though, there's nothing specific in the code
Okay.
requiring that.
Okay, so dressers, things like that. Even
Yeah, it's
educating
just
your tenants on
Exactly.
where to put those.
absolutely.
Okay. Are all suites illegal or legal going to require registration? You guys wouldn't be able to call an illegal suite on the registration, would you? Put that on the.
So the registry itself is it's a bylaw that was adopted by council, and the way it's worded is that all suites that are advertised for rent to the public have to be on the registry. Now, to get on the registry, you have to go through the permitting process, right? So only legal suites are on the registry.
Perfect.
And our overall objective, and I think the thing about the 2-year amnesty period is we won't be getting all these suites on the registry in 2 years. That's
Right.
not our intention, right? It's to get as many as we can. And post 2020, we're still looking to get all these suites on the registry, but the idea is that we want to get as many as we can on that registry in the next 2 years, and through that process, we're bringing illegal suites into legality, I
Yeah,
guess.
the whole goal is to help out and get as many on the register as we can and make them as safe as possible.
So let's fast forward past the 2-year period. And Bruce, this will speak to your other question. So, and the intent from the city standpoint. So we fast forward. It's now 2020, and someone's advertising on Kijiji or Rent Faster for a suite, and it is not on the registry. So that would be someone that's not in compliance, I guess. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. So the answer is yes, and obviously we'll learn more about what the penalties and things like that are.
Yeah, as we progress.
As
For
we
now,
progress.
it's an amnesty period, and our hope is that as many people as possible come in to
Okay.
upgrade.
Something to watch for in the future. Secondary suites requiring for dedicated heating, venting, and hot water tank. We answered that already, I think.
The heating is actually a good one.
Okay,
So that's another big item. So heating and ventilation on an existing suite that was built prior to December 31st, 2006, you can use a single heating and ventilation system. On a brand new suite, then separate heating and ventilation system is required.
So 2 furnaces.
So it could be 2 furnaces, could be use the existing furnace for the upper dwelling unit and add electric baseboard heat for the basement suite, and a heat recovery ventilator, because you have to heat the space and you have to ventilate it. You need to bring fresh air in. So there are several different options, but on a brand new one, you need the separate heating and ventilation.
Great question, Jane. We're at the 10:34 question mark, if you guys are following along here. So Brent Wilcox, does street parking count for designated parking? How many homes or many homes don't have garages or backyard parking currently?
So no, street parking does not count. So
Nope.
you required parking stall. So most of the time, it's one extra stall. So you need one parking stall for the house and a second one for the suite, and they have to be provided on site.
Okay.
So the
A
development.
backyard parking pad or something
Yeah, it can be a
like
pad,
that,
it can be in a garage, yeah, absolutely. And you know what, like the development permits that we've reviewed over the last number of years, 9.5 out of 10 of those development permits can provide that parking stall.
Right,
So,
okay.
we generally haven't seen it as being prohibitive to suites.
Right, knock a fence down, put some gravel down or something.
There's options,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Is the backyard suite still the same size of the secondary suite? Maybe not sure what to get into. Is there size limitations or requirements that the backyard suite must have the same sort of amenities that a secondary suite does
Yeah,
in
so
the basement?
the amenity size space is still the same. So the maximum size of backyard suite can be is 75 square meters. But that is, limited by your parcel coverage and your setbacks and whatnot. So the biggest it possibly could be is 75 square meters for a backyard suite.
Perfect. If you ever do a land use designation, does it ever expire?
No,
Okay.
does not.
Okay, fantastic.
Sorry, I just want to jump in. I assume
Yeah.
that was regarding parcels that have been redesignated to RC1S. And I did include that in the presentation, but to be absolutely clear, if you have a parcel that's designated RC1S, nothing has changed for you.
Okay,
Yeah, your development rights were not affected whatsoever.
perfect. Just going to keep moving here. So Patricia West, that was answered about about the sprinkler heads, only on houses pre-2014 or suites pre-2006.
2006.
Yeah, so December 31st, 2006. Yeah, so December 31st, 2006 is that
Lots of
date.
dates.
That's why I shouldn't talk.
So December 31st, 2006, that's anything before that is existing. Anything after that is new, which would be under the 2014 building code.
Perfect. Laneway suites, I don't know what a laneway suite is.
That's a common term. So nanny flats, garden suites, laneway.
Okay.
We just call them backyard suites
Okay.
in Calgary.
So same thing, you guys said it could be a separate building, as long as it works. And
Yeah, it can be above an attached garage, it can be at grade attached to a garage, or it could be its own standalone building as well.
Perfect. And that is the end of the question. So I'm cutting it off there, even though I know there'll be some more. citycalgary.ca/suites. Todd, John, Dane, thank you guys so much for your time
Thank you.
coming on to the
pleasure,
meeting.
yeah.
Really appreciate it. Virtual applause from the audience. And what we're going to do is this will be posted online, so you guys can go ahead and watch the video, obviously, and then citycalgary.ca for suites. And from there, we're going to leave you guys with our video. And next week, we're doing a great agent pursuit interview with Mike Starr on lead generation. Thanks, guys. All the best.